Chapter 1, The Kitchen Table Decision. The morning light came through the kitchen window at exactly the same angle it had for the past 11 years, falling across the same worn spot on the linoleum where Sarah Mitchum stood every morning making coffee. She watched the steam rise from her mug, twisting in the January cold that seeped through the single-pane glass. Outside, frost covered everything: the propane tank, the rust-spotted swing set, the '04 Silverado that hadn't started in 3 days. Tom sat at the table behind her, still in his work shirt from the night shift, his hands wrapped around his own coffee like he was trying to absorb its warmth into his bones. He hadn't said much since coming through the door an hour ago. Sarah knew that silence. It was the kind that meant bills, or broken equipment, or another round of layoffs at the plant. "They're cutting overtime," he finally said. "Effective next week." Sarah didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on the frost patterns outside, geometric and beautiful and completely indifferent to what they meant for families like hers. Overtime wasn't extra money for them. It was groceries. It was keeping the heat above 60. It was the difference between managing and drowning. "How much are we looking at?" she asked, her voice carefully level. "About $800 a month. Maybe more." The number sat between them like a physical thing. $800. The exact amount of their mortgage payment, give or take. Sarah did the math automatically, the way she'd learned to do over years of practice, subtracting, rearranging, trying to make numbers fit into spaces they wouldn't go. She thought about calling the electric company again, asking for another extension. They'd been kind the last 2 times, but kindness had limits. Behind her, she heard Tom shift in his chair, the familiar creak of wood under weight. "There's something else," he said. "Guy came to the plant yesterday. From the county. Handing out flyers about some new program." Sarah finally turned. Tom was holding a piece of paper, bright white and official-looking, creased from being folded in his pocket. Even from across the kitchen, she could see the county seal at the top, the bold letters of a heading she couldn't quite make out. What kind of program? Financial assistance. For families in economic hardship. Tom's voice carried something she couldn't identify, not quite hope, but maybe the memory of it. "Says they can help with mortgage payments, medical bills, utilities. Even food assistance and childcare support." Sarah crossed to the table and took the flyer from his hands. The paper was smooth, expensively printed. The heading read, "Family Stabilization Initiative, a partnership for your future." Below it, photographs of smiling families, diverse, attractive, aspirational. A father helping his daughter with homework. A mother serving dinner. Children playing in a yard that looked nothing like theirs. The text was dense, but certain phrases jumped out at her. Comprehensive support services. Debt relief options. Long-term security for qualifying households. At the bottom, in smaller print, application deadline February 15th, eligible families may qualify for immediate assistance. Immediate, Sarah repeated softly. The word felt almost foreign. Everything in their lives moved slowly, debt accumulated slowly, paychecks came slowly, hope eroded slowly. Immediate belonged to a different world. Tom leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I know what you're thinking. That it sounds too good. That there's got to be a catch. Isn't there always? Maybe. But Sarah," he stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up at her, she saw something in his eyes that frightened her more than anger or frustration ever had. She saw exhaustion. The kind that lived in the bones. "I'm tired. I'm so goddamn tired of counting pennies and choosing which bills to pay and watching you skip meals so the kids can have seconds. I don't. You do. I see you." His voice cracked slightly. "I see you, and I see Emma asking why we can't go to the movies like her friends, and I see Jake wearing sneakers with holes in them because we're waiting for a sale that might not come. And I know you're about to tell me we'll figure it out, that we always do, but Sarah, what if we don't have to just figure it out anymore? What if there's actually help? Sarah looked down at the flyer again, reading more carefully now. The program offered tiered assistance based on need. Families could receive up to 36 months of support, including direct payments, subsidized services, and access to job training programs. The requirements seemed straightforward: proof of income, proof of residence, documentation of debts and expenses. A simple application process. A review period of just 10 business days. 10 days. They could know in 10 days if they qualified. If someone was actually going to help them instead of offering sympathy and payment plans they couldn't afford anyway. There has to be fine print, she said, but her conviction was wavering. Terms and conditions. Things they're not putting in the flyer. Then we read them. We go to the information session, Tom pointed to a date and time listed at the bottom, and we ask questions. We don't sign anything until we understand exactly what we're agreeing to. But Sarah, we at least have to look. Don't we? Through the window, Sarah could see the school bus pulling up to the corner. In a moment, Emma and Jake would come thundering down the stairs, arguing about something meaningless and vital, filling the kitchen with noise and life and need. They would eat the breakfast she'd prepared, oatmeal, because it was cheap and filling, and they would ask what was for dinner, and whether they could go to Tyler's birthday party on Saturday, and if maybe this summer they could go camping like they used to. And Sarah would smile and deflect and promise maybes that felt more like no's with each passing month. She thought about the heating bill sitting on the counter, marked with its second notice. She thought about Tom's truck refusing to start in their driveway, about the $1,200 the mechanic said it would take to fix it properly. She thought about her own part-time hours at the grocery store, how she'd been hoping for full-time for 18 months now, how her manager kept saying, soon, in a tone that meant never. She thought about how tired she was too. Okay, Sarah heard herself say. We'll go to the information session. We'll ask questions. She met Tom's eyes. But we read everything. Every single word. Before we sign anything. Tom nodded, something like relief crossing his face. Every word, he agreed. The bus horn honked outside. Upstairs, the thunder of feet began. Sarah folded the flyer and set it on the counter, propped against the napkin holder where she'd see it every time she stood at the sink. The morning light shifted slightly, moving across the floor in its familiar pattern, marking time the way it always had. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 15 minutes ago. But something had changed. Sarah could feel it, the way you feel a shift in air pressure before a storm. They were going to accept help. They were going to sign up for something. They were going to say yes to people they didn't know, to promises printed on expensive paper, to the hope that someone somewhere actually cared whether their family survived or sank. The kitchen filled with her children's voices, bright and unaware. Sarah turned to greet them, the flyer behind her, its words already working themselves into the fabric of what came next. Chapter 2, The Auditorium. The high school auditorium smelled like floor wax and old wood, the same smell Sarah remembered from her own graduation 20 years ago. She sat beside Tom in a middle row, surrounded by people who looked exactly like them, worn jackets, tired eyes, the careful posture of those who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. The room was nearly full. Sarah counted maybe 200 people, possibly more. She hadn't expected this many. Somehow she'd imagined they'd be alone in their desperation, or nearly so. But looking around at the sea of faces, young mothers with babies on their hips, older couples clutching each other's hands, men in work boots still dirty from job sites, she realized how naive that had been. The whole county was struggling. They all were. At 7 o'clock exactly, a woman in a navy suit walked onto the stage. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked hair pulled back neatly, and she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Behind her, two men wheeled out a projection screen and a podium bearing the same county seal Sarah had seen on the flyer. "Good evening," the woman said, her voice amplified by microphone, warm and professional. My name is Margaret Hendricks, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for the Family Stabilization Initiative. I want to start by thanking you all for being here tonight. I know it's not easy to ask for help. But that's exactly why this program exists, because we understand that hardworking families sometimes need support. And you deserve that support. A murmur of approval rippled through the audience. Tom shifted beside Sarah, leaning forward slightly. She could feel his attention focusing, feel him wanting to believe. Margaret clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with a presentation slide. The FSI is a federally funded program administered at the county level. It was designed to provide comprehensive, long-term assistance to families facing economic hardship through no fault of their own. Job losses, medical emergencies, unexpected expenses, we understand that life happens. And we're here to help you get back on stable ground. The slides changed as she spoke, showing statistics, graphs, testimonials. Sarah tried to focus on the details, but Margaret's voice had a practiced rhythm that made it difficult to separate information from reassurance. The program offered mortgage assistance, utility subsidies, food stipends, childcare support, job training, even educational grants for children. The benefits were substantial, thousands of dollars per month for qualifying families. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, Margaret continued, offering a knowing smile. This sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? And I appreciate that skepticism. You should ask questions. You should understand what you're agreeing to. Sarah felt Tom glance at her. She kept her eyes on the stage. The truth is, there are requirements. This isn't free money. We ask that participating families engage with our support services, attend financial literacy workshops, meet with case managers quarterly, participate in community programs. We believe in hand-ups, not handouts. We want to help you build lasting stability, not just get through this month. The slides showed smiling families again, these ones supposedly program participants. A father shaking hands with a case manager. A mother at a computer, presumably in job training. Children in what looked like an after-school program. Additionally, Margaret said, and something in her tone shifted, became more formal, more careful, participating families agree to certain data sharing protocols. We need to track outcomes, measure success, ensure taxpayer dollars are being used effectively. This means regular check-ins, documentation of how assistance is being used, and periodic assessments of your progress toward financial independence. Sarah's hand found the pen in her purse. She pulled out the small notebook she used for grocery lists and began writing. Data sharing protocols. Regular check-ins. Documentation. The words felt heavier than Margaret's delivery suggested. For families who own property, Margaret continued, we do require a lien arrangement. This is standard practice for any significant financial assistance. Think of it like a second mortgage. We place a lien on your property equal to the amount of assistance provided. If you complete the program successfully and meet all requirements, the lien is forgiven entirely. It's simply a protection measure to ensure program integrity. A lien. Sarah's pen paused. That meant if they failed somehow, if they couldn't meet the requirements, the county could take their house. She looked around the auditorium, wondering if everyone else understood that, if they were all doing the same math she was. But the faces around her showed only attention, hope, the desperate focus of people being thrown a rope. Tom leaned close to her ear. We'd have to be careful, he whispered. Follow every rule exactly. Sarah nodded but didn't look at him. On stage, Margaret was explaining the application process, simple, she promised. Straightforward. They had staff available to help with paperwork. Most families heard back within 10 days. Assistance could begin almost immediately after approval. I want to open the floor to questions now, Margaret said, gesturing welcomingly. Please, don't be shy. This is your opportunity to get clarity. Hands went up throughout the auditorium. Sarah listened as people asked about eligibility, about benefit amounts, about how long the program had been running. Margaret answered each question smoothly, confidently. She had clearly done this many times before. A man in the back stood. "What happens if we can't complete the program? If something goes wrong?" Margaret's smile didn't waver. "Our goal is to set you up for success. We work with families to overcome obstacles. But if someone voluntarily withdraws or violates program terms, yes, the lien becomes enforceable. However, I want to stress, we're not looking for reasons to deny people. We want you to succeed." More questions followed, but Sarah had stopped listening. She was staring at her notebook, at the words she'd written. Lien. Data sharing. Requirements. Success or failure. The temperature in the auditorium felt suddenly oppressive, too many bodies breathing the same air. Beside her, Tom was nodding along with something Margaret was saying. His face held an expression Sarah recognized, determination mixed with relief. He'd already decided. She could see it. He was going to want to apply. On stage, Margaret Hendricks smiled at her audience like a teacher proud of her students, like someone offering salvation instead of terms and conditions. "We have application packets at the doors," she said. "Take one home. Read through everything. And please, let us help you." Around them, people began to stand, gathering their coats, moving toward the exits where county employees stood holding stacks of thick manila envelopes. The crowd moved like a river, flowing forward, carrying Tom and Sarah with it whether they chose to swim or not. Sarah clutched her notebook, her small list of warnings that already felt inadequate against the tide of hope surrounding them. They reached the door. Someone pressed a packet into her hands. The envelope was heavy, substantial. Outside, the January night had grown colder. Their breath formed clouds as they walked to the truck. Neither spoke. Sarah held the envelope against her chest, feeling its weight, wondering what exactly she was carrying toward their kitchen table and their future. Chapter 3, What They Didn't Say. The application packet sat on the kitchen table for 3 days before Sarah finally opened it. She'd been avoiding it, she knew, moving it from counter to counter again, always finding something else that needed doing first. Tom hadn't pushed, but she felt his awareness of it, the way his eyes tracked the envelope's movements through their small kitchen. On the third night, after the kids were asleep, she made tea and sat down with it. Tom joined her without a word, bringing his reading glasses and a highlighter from the junk drawer. They worked in silence, pulling out page after page of forms and documents and dense paragraphs of text. The application itself was straightforward enough: income verification, household expenses, outstanding debts. Sarah filled in the numbers mechanically, watching their financial situation materialize in neat boxes and columns. Seeing it all written out like this made it worse somehow. The gap between what they earned and what they owed felt obscene in black ink. But it was the attached documents that made her hands slow. The terms of participation ran to 47 pages. Sarah started reading from the beginning, forcing herself to focus on every word despite the legal language that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. Section 4.2 detailed the home lien arrangement. Standard, Margaret had called it. But reading the actual terms, Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The lien would equal 100% of all assistance received, plus administrative fees of 3% annually. If they received the maximum assistance for the full 36 months, they could easily owe $60,000 or more. The lien would take priority over their existing mortgage. "That means if we default," she said slowly, "the county gets paid before the bank." Tom looked up from the page he was reading. "We won't default. But if we did?" "Sarah." His voice was patient but strained. "We won't. We'll follow the rules. We'll do everything they ask." She wanted to argue, but what could she say? That she had a feeling. That something about this made her uneasy in a way she couldn't articulate. That wasn't enough reason to turn down help they desperately needed. She kept reading. Section 7 covered the data sharing protocols Margaret had mentioned. Participants agreed to provide access to medical records, educational records for all children, employment history, banking information, and communication records if requested. The county could share this information with partnering agencies and research institutions for program evaluation purposes. Sarah read that paragraph 3 times. They want access to our medical records? Our kids' school files? Tom frowned, scanning the section himself. It says for program evaluation. They probably need to show the federal government that the money's being used right. But who else sees it? What are these research institutions? Does it matter? Tom's voice rose slightly, frustration creeping in. Sarah, what do you want me to say? That there are strings attached? Of course there are. There are always strings. But the alternative is, what? We lose the house in 6 months when we can't make the mortgage. I get a second job and never see my kids. You keep pretending you're not hungry at dinner. The words hit harder than he'd probably intended. Sarah looked away, blinking against sudden heat in her eyes. I'm sorry, Tom said immediately. I didn't mean, I just... No, you're right. Sarah's voice came out flat. I'm looking for problems because I'm scared. But being scared doesn't pay bills. She turned to the next section. Section 9 detailed the case management requirements. Monthly home visits. Quarterly financial reviews. Mandatory participation in workshops on budgeting, nutrition, parenting skills, and employment readiness. Random compliance checks. Random. The word snagged in her mind. Someone could show up at any time to verify they were meeting requirements. What did that mean, exactly? Someone going through their cabinets to check if they were buying approved foods. Someone judging whether their home was clean enough, their children well-behaved enough. Section 12 made her breath catch. Participants agree to medical monitoring as deemed appropriate by program administrators. This may include periodic health screenings, wellness checks, and participation in approved health initiatives. Tom. Sarah pushed the packet toward him. Read Section 12. He read it, his brow furrowing. Medical monitoring. That's probably just checkups, right? Making sure families stay healthy. It doesn't say checkups. It says monitoring. And approved health initiatives, what does that mean? I don't know. Maybe vaccinations? Health education? Maybe. But Sarah's unease was crystallizing into something sharper. The language was too vague, too open to interpretation. They could define appropriate and approved however they wanted. And participants agreed in advance to whatever that might be. She flipped to the signature page. Above the line where they would sign, a paragraph in slightly smaller font, by signing below, applicants acknowledge they have read and understood all terms and conditions of participation, including but not limited to sections 1 to 24 of this agreement. Applicants waive right to legal action against the program or its administrators except as specifically outlined in Section 21(c). Applicants understand that violation of any program terms may result in immediate termination of benefits and enforcement of all liens and financial obligations. Waive right to legal action. Sarah read it again. If something went wrong, if they were harmed somehow, they couldn't sue. They'd be signing away that right before they even knew what they were agreeing to. This is too much, she said quietly. Tom, this is too much control. They want access to everything, our money, our health, our home, our children's information. And we can't even take them to court if they abuse it. Tom was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. Then what do we do? Tell me what we do instead. Sarah had no answer. She looked at the papers spread across their kitchen table, at the numbers that proved their desperation, at the terms that promised help in exchange for everything. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window in its frame. The same window she'd looked through 3 days ago, watching frost cover their world. The same world that didn't care whether they survived or not. Maybe we could talk to a lawyer, she tried. Before we sign. Just to. With what money, Sarah? Tom wasn't angry, just exhausted. We can't afford a lawyer. We can barely afford groceries. He was right. Of course he was right. Sarah looked down at the signature page again, at the blank line waiting for her name. Such a small space to sign away so much. She thought about Emma asking for new sneakers. Jake needing braces next year. The truck dying in the driveway. The heat that wasn't quite warm enough. She thought about Margaret Hendricks's smile, so confident and assured. We want you to succeed. But the pages in front of her told a different story. These weren't terms designed for their success. These were terms designed for their compliance. Their surrender. I need more time, Sarah said. Just a few more days. To think. Tom nodded slowly, but she saw disappointment cross his face before he could hide it. He stood, gathering his glasses. The deadline's February 15th. 2 weeks. He left her alone at the table with the papers. Sarah sat in the silence, her tea gone cold, reading and rereading the terms that would determine whether they kept their home or lost everything. Somewhere in the dense legal language was the truth they'd been told to ignore. She could feel it hiding between the lines, in the careful words and deliberate vagueness. But feeling it and proving it were different things. And needing help was stronger than both. Chapter 4, The Signatures. Sarah found Tom in the garage on February 14th, sitting on an overturned bucket beside his truck. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting in the cold with his hands dangling between his knees. The application packet lay on the workbench, still unsigned. Tomorrow was the deadline. She'd spent 2 weeks trying to find another way. She'd called every assistance program in the phone book, churches, nonprofits, county services. The wait lists were 6 months long, a year long, indefinite. The amounts they offered were laughable, $200 here, a voucher there. Band-aids on a hemorrhage. She'd looked into bankruptcy, into loan modifications, into payment plans that wouldn't actually solve anything. She'd lain awake calculating and recalculating, trying to make their numbers work through sheer force of will. They didn't work. They wouldn't work. And yesterday, the hospital had called about Jake's emergency room visit from last fall. The bill they thought insurance had covered. $4,000, payment due in 30 days. Sarah sat down on the garage floor beside Tom's bucket. The concrete was freezing through her jeans, but she didn't move. Emma asked me this morning why we looked so sad, Tom said quietly. I told her we were just tired. What did she say? She said we're always tired now. He laughed, but it came out broken. She's 8 years old and she's already learned that tired means something else. Sarah closed her eyes. Through the garage wall, she could hear their neighbors, the Richardsons, laughing about something. Normal life, happening everywhere around them while they sat in the cold trying to decide how much of themselves to give away. I called my sister, Tom continued. Asked if we could borrow money. She cried on the phone, Sarah. She cried because she wanted to help and she can't. They're barely making it themselves. I know. My mom offered us $2,000. That's her entire savings. Her emergency money. And it's not even enough to cover 1 month of what we're behind on. Sarah already knew all of this. She'd been doing the same desperate arithmetic, making the same humiliating phone calls. They'd exhausted every option, every possibility, every avenue that didn't lead back to that packet on the workbench. We could walk away from the house, she said, though even suggesting it made her chest tight. Let the bank take it. Find somewhere cheaper to rent. With our credit? We'd need first month, last month, security deposit, money we don't have. And rent for anything big enough for 4 people isn't much cheaper than our mortgage anyway. Tom finally looked at her. And this is our home, Sarah. We brought both kids home from the hospital to this house. Emma's height marks are on the doorframe in the kitchen. Jake's tree fort is in the backyard. This is the only home they remember. She knew that too. She knew all of it. Every argument, every reason, every impossible choice. The terms scare me, Sarah said. The medical monitoring. The home visits. The way they can interpret the rules however they want. It feels like we'd be giving them permission to control our whole lives. I know. Tom's voice was barely above a whisper. It scares me too. They sat in silence. From inside the house, Sarah heard Jake and Emma fighting over something, their voices raised and then settling as one of them conceded whatever childhood battle they were waging. Those ordinary sounds of family life that might not be ordinary much longer. What if we're very careful? Tom said finally. What if we follow every single rule exactly, keep perfect records, never give them a reason to fault us? We could do it for 3 years. 36 months. And then we'd be free, and the lien would be forgiven, and we'd actually be stable again. And if something goes wrong? If they decide we violated some term we didn't understand? Then we lose the house. But Sarah, we're going to lose it anyway if we don't do this. At least this way we have a chance. Sarah wanted to argue, but exhaustion was settling into her bones like the cold from the concrete floor. She was so tired of being scared. Tired of choosing between bad options. Tired of watching her children slowly realize that their family was failing. 3 years, she said. We'd have to be perfect for 3 years. We can be perfect for 3 years. Could they? Sarah didn't know. She didn't know if anyone could be perfect under that kind of scrutiny, following rules they didn't fully understand, administered by people who held all the power. But she also didn't know how to keep going without help. Tom stood, reached down to help her up. Together they walked back into the house, into the kitchen where the packet waited. Sarah's hands were shaking as she picked up the pen. Tom had already signed his name on the first line, his signature unfamiliar and careful as if he were signing something sacred. Or damning. She thought about reading through it all one more time, but what would be the point? The words wouldn't change. Their situation wouldn't change. Either they signed or they didn't, and not signing meant certain disaster while signing meant possible survival. The pen felt heavy in her hand. Together? Tom said softly. Sarah nodded. She pressed the pen to paper and wrote her name in the space provided, each letter a small surrender. Sarah and Mitchum. The same name she'd signed on their marriage license, on their mortgage papers, on both children's birth certificates. The name that meant wife and mother and homeowner and all the things she was trying desperately not to lose. Tom gathered the pages, straightening them with care. He slid them back into the envelope, sealed it. On the front, he wrote in clear block letters, Family Stabilization Initiative Application. Tomorrow morning he'd drop it at the county office before his shift. It was done. Sarah felt like she should say something, mark the moment somehow. But there was nothing to say. They'd made their choice. They'd signed away their privacy, their autonomy, their right to refuse whatever came next, all in exchange for the chance to keep their home and feed their children. Tom pulled her close, and she let herself lean against him, feeling his heartbeat through his shirt. Steady and scared, just like hers. It'll be okay, he whispered into her hair. We'll make it okay. Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't promise something she didn't know was true. In the living room, Emma turned on the television. Jake asked what was for dinner. Life continued, ordinary and oblivious, while in the kitchen 2 parents stood holding each other, having just signed documents they didn't fully understand, binding their family to terms they couldn't predict. The envelope sat on the counter, sealed and ready. Outside, February darkness fell early and complete. Sarah watched it swallow their yard, their street, everything beyond the window, until all she could see was their own reflection, two people standing in a small bright kitchen, holding on to each other because there was nothing else left to hold. Chapter 5, 18 months later. The case manager's car pulled into the driveway at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes early for the scheduled home visit. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, her stomach nodding the way it always did when she saw that particular shade of county-issued gray sedan. She'd cleaned for 2 hours this morning, the same desperate cleaning she did before every visit, checking for dust, organizing cabinets, making sure everything looked exactly right. Tom was at work. He was always at work now. The program had gotten him into a job training course, then placed him in a new position at a manufacturing plant 40 minutes away. Better pay, they said. More stable. He left at 6 in the morning and came home after 7 at night, exhausted and quiet. They barely spoke anymore except about schedules and requirements and the endless documentation the program demanded. The case manager, a thin woman named Patricia with kind eyes that had grown progressively less kind over 18 months, walked up to the door with her tablet and her official smile. Sarah opened it before she could knock. "Good morning, Sarah. May I come in?" As if Sarah could say no. Patricia moved through the house with practiced efficiency, checking the pantry contents against approved nutrition guidelines, photographing the children's room to document appropriate living conditions, asking questions that felt like accusations wrapped in concern. How was Emma's performance in the after-school program? Had Tom been attending his mandatory financial literacy workshops? When was the last time the family had a comprehensive health screening? Actually, Patricia said, settling at the kitchen table with her tablet, that's something we need to discuss. You're overdue for your quarterly health monitoring. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. We had checkups in December. Those were routine physicals. I'm talking about the expanded screening. It's part of the new health initiative launched for all program participants. Patricia swiped through screens. You should have received notification last month. I didn't receive anything. Well, you're receiving it now. Patricia's smile was practiced, impersonal. The county has partnered with a research university studying long-term health outcomes in economically stressed populations. As program participants, your family is required to participate. It's completely voluntary, of course, except that participation is a condition of continued benefits. Voluntary except mandatory. Sarah had learned that the program loved those kinds of contradictions. What kind of screening? Blood work, comprehensive metabolic panels, psychological assessments, environmental exposure testing. For all family members. Patricia was already typing. I can schedule you for next Tuesday. The facility is about 90 minutes north, in the University Medical Center. 90 minutes. I have work. The kids have school. It's excused. We'll provide documentation. Sarah, this isn't optional. The kindness had left Patricia's voice entirely now. You signed the participation agreement. Section 12, Medical Monitoring. This is exactly what you agreed to. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Section 12. The vague language she'd worried about 18 months ago, now manifesting as strangers taking her children's blood for research she didn't understand and couldn't refuse. And if we don't go? Patricia met her eyes directly. Then you're in violation of program terms. Benefits terminate immediately. The lien becomes enforceable. She paused. You've received $47,000 in assistance so far. Plus administrative fees, that's approximately $51,000 the county would be entitled to collect. Immediately. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. $51,000. Money they'd already spent on mortgage payments and utilities and food and all the ordinary desperations of staying alive. Money they could never repay. We'll be there Tuesday, Sarah heard herself say. After Patricia left, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. The house was too quiet. Through the window, she could see their yard, Jake's tree fort starting to rot, Emma's swing set rusted through. They'd received assistance to keep the house, but no time to actually live in it. Tom worked constantly, the kids were always in mandatory programs, and Sarah spent her days documenting and complying and proving they deserved the help that was slowly suffocating them. On the refrigerator hung a letter from the program, congratulating them on 18 months of successful participation. Halfway through. 18 more months and they'd be free, the lien forgiven, released from the terms that governed every aspect of their lives. If they made it that long. Sarah pulled out her phone and searched for the research study Patricia had mentioned. She found it buried in the university website, Longitudinal Health Impacts of Economic Intervention Programs in Rural Populations. The abstract mentioned biomarkers, stress indicators, generational health tracking. At the bottom, in small print, study funded by federal grant #HS 2847, administered through county assistance programs. They were test subjects. That's what the fine print had meant. That's what they'd signed up for without knowing. Not just recipients of aid, but data points in someone's research. Their blood, their health, their children's development, all of it material for studies they'd never see, conclusions they'd never understand, papers that would be published with their information stripped of names but not of suffering. She thought about calling Tom, but what would she say? They were trapped. The moment they'd signed those papers, they'd stepped into a cage disguised as salvation. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Your health screening appointment is confirmed for Tuesday, August 15th, 7 a.m. Failure to attend will result in program violation. Bring all family members. Fasting required after midnight." Sarah deleted the text, but it didn't matter. The appointment would still exist. The requirements would still stand. She walked to the counter where the original application packet still sat in a drawer, kept for their records. She pulled it out and flipped to section 12, reading the words she'd read 100 times since signing: medical monitoring is deemed appropriate by program administrators. Appropriate. They'd defined it after the signatures were collected, after families were locked in, after the choice was already made. This was the catch she'd known existed but couldn't identify. Not cruelty, exactly. Not even illegal. Just power exercised over people with no power to refuse. Outside, the afternoon sun made everything look normal. Neighbors mowing lawns, kids riding bikes, ordinary life proceeding as if the world were fair. As if help didn't come with hooks. As if signing papers without reading the fine print didn't mean surrendering pieces of yourself you didn't know could be taken. Sarah's hands were shaking. She put the packet away, closed the drawer. In 18 months, if they followed every rule, endured every intrusion, submitted to every requirement, they'd be released. The house would be theirs, clear and free. If they made it that long. If the program didn't add new requirements. If appropriate didn't expand to mean something worse than blood draws and research studies. If. Sarah stood at the window, looking out at the life they'd tried so hard to save, wondering what exactly they'd saved and what they'd lost without even knowing it was at risk. The case manager's car was gone, but Sarah could still feel the weight of those kind, unkind eyes. Watching. Measuring. Documenting their compliance for reports that would be filed and forgotten by everyone except the families living inside them. They'd signed the papers without reading the fine print. And now, 18 months in, Sarah finally understood what the fine print had always meant, that help came with a price, that the price was everything, and that by the time you realized what you'd agreed to, it was already far too late to refuse.